Welcome to the 4MileCircus, the official podcast of 4MileCircus, which is a media production and social media services company based in Brooklyn. Check us out at 4milecircus.com. That's the number 4, followed by the word Mile Circus. My name is Sean Mannion. I'm a writer-director in Brooklyn.
And I'm Nicole. I'm the other half of 4MileCircus and a writer, director, producer based in Brooklyn. On this podcast, we will talk to independent artists and media makers about their relationships with social media. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on iTunes or your platform of choice and give us a 5-star review. It really helps spread the word about the show.
We're going to be live streaming this and future interviews on Facebook as we conduct them. So like 4MileCircus on Facebook to be notified of future live streams so you can see all our mistakes and comment with questions for the guest. Some questions may even make it into the show. On today's episode, we're featuring an interview with multi-talented indie film writer, director, producer Christina Raia of Congested Cat Productions and the celebrated monthly Indie Works short film series. She recently released her debut feature, The Horror Film Summit. On this second of a multi-episode in-depth interview with Christina, we talk about social media and crowdfunding for Summit and her other projects. But first, special just for you, here's our social media tip of the episode.
One element you may use in your social mediaing is images, especially if you're an image-driven person like we supposedly are as filmmakers, because film is a visual medium. So one suggestion I have is just in general, regardless of the platform you're on, always try to include images. Obviously, some platforms like Snapchat or Instagram are more specifically visually driven, so you're kind of going to include an image no matter what on any of your posts. But also, it is helpful in terms of the varying algorithms that different platforms have that help them decide how many eyeballs to put your content in front of, most primarily on Facebook, but increasingly a bit on Twitter as well. And also, general consensus is that probably posts get shared more often when they have images attached to them. People are more likely to click to expand them to see the whole thing. So you'll get more impressions, you'll get more engagement, you'll get more shares, you'll get more likes. And specifically, especially on Facebook, which we will talk at some point in more depth about the evil Facebook algorithm that is preventing people from seeing anything you post to your professional pages unless you pay to boost it. But Facebook basically favors posts that contain original content that has been uploaded to Facebook itself. So for example, say you want to share a video on Facebook. You're going to get a lot more eyes on your post if you upload the video directly to Facebook than if you link from a Facebook post to an external site like YouTube or Vimeo or whatever it is. So just in general, I suggest anytime you're posting on Facebook and Twitter and anywhere else, on Twitter you can add up to 4 images on a given post. It'll cut a little bit into your character limit, so you'll have to balance that in terms of how many words you need to have. You can upload video. Facebook, same thing. You can upload a ton of images. You can arrange them in albums. You can arrange them in carousels, slideshows, whatever. They've got a lot of options for that. But as much as possible, even if you're just making a post that's being like, hey, I'm going to be at Prospect Park on Sunday at noon to go see the goats. Like, upload a picture of a goat. Or upload a picture that has nothing to do with your post, for that matter, quite frankly. But upload something so Facebook has some original content that you've contributed, just because they're going to weigh your post better in their algorithm that way than otherwise. So, basic rule of thumb, images, use them.
Yeah. Did you know, though, that Twitter just announced that images and links will no longer factor into the 140?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, did you?
I didn't see that.
In the next week or two, it's changing.
They just announced it yesterday.
Great. Yeah.
Also, usernames won't count against your character count anymore either.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
Except for the only potential issue with that is suddenly getting spammed by people who they want to send you something, and so now they're not restricted to 100. They're gonna just pick all the usernames, and I mean that's probably not gonna happen that often. And I'm much more excited about being able to just like send several people a link, or tag like people who were part of a project without having to send like 4 tweets for it, which is which is nice because but yeah, that's Twitter's I guess Twitter has been having some problems with user retention and getting new users. They've kind of plateaued, and so they're kind of doing some things that maybe they should have done before.
Yeah, I was going to say, good move, Twitter. I approve. And also, I'll give everyone a bonus social media tip because of this, which is don't be afraid to block and report. So if you're getting spammers who are tweeting at you and thousands of other people, because they can put thousands of Twitter handles in a tweet now without accounting against their character limit, block and report. It's your friend. I mean, not that the reporting is going to necessarily do much, but they do more with spammers than people being abusive. That's another whole episode of the podcast.
We could do a whole episode. We should find an expert on that.
We could.
We should. Yeah.
Who do we know who's been harassed on Twitter? I can think of a few people.
Oh, no, I don't mean necessarily somebody who's been harassed. But, well, I mean, it can be somebody who's been harassed, but I just mean like maybe somebody
who has harassed.
Yeah, I mean, other than me, obviously. No, I mean like somebody who studies it or somebody who's written about it a lot or something like that. That would be good.
Yeah.
Because one example is good, but 10 examples is better, and I can't fit 10 people in my apartment, so just one person who's already done all that legwork. So today's episode is about crowdfunding and social media, and we have Christina here, and we kind of want to talk about it in terms specifically of you've done crowdfunding several times for projects, and but for the next couple episodes we want to talk a little bit more about your feature Summit, but we can certainly touch on the rest and like how you've learned about things. But we want to talk about crowdfunding and social media for Summit today, and then in the next couple episodes we'll talk about how you used it in production and when you finally released the film recently. But let's start again, just in case anybody's picking up the show for the first time. Why don't you give a quick and dirty intro of yourself?
Oh, of myself?
Yeah.
Sure. My name's Christina Raia. I'm an independent filmmaker in New York. I also run a monthly screening series called IndieWorks, where we showcase the work of other local filmmakers, and I am a crowdfunding specialist at Seed and Spark. And I do a lot of things in independent film.
You do a lot of things in independent film. So tell me, since we're going to be talking about Summit, and that's not to restrict you from talking about your other projects, because you have a lot, but why don't you tell people what Summit is?
Sure. So Summit is my first feature. It's a horror film about 5 friends who are going on a ski trip and end up at the wrong location. And it's kind of a character study in the form of a horror film. And I wrote it while I was still in school in 2011, and then I crowdfunded it in 2012. And I shot it in 2013. And I released it at the beginning of this year, 2016, after being on the festival circuit for about a year.
Cool. So, let's start with what was Summit was your first crowdfunding campaign, is that right? No,
it was my second after crowdfunding a short in 2011, but that was it was only for $1,000, and I really didn't know what the hell I was doing. I mean, I made the money, but it was kind of where I made a lot of mistakes and then realized why what I was doing wasn't working, and then I corrected for my next campaign.
Okay. And so for did you use social media for your first crowdfunding campaign?
I only used Facebook, and I did a lot of the bad stuff that you should not do, which was telling people that they, can give up a cup of coffee this morning to contribute to my campaign. Things like that was, shaming people for how they like to spend money, or telling them they had to kind of sacrifice something to give to my campaign. And when I realized that wasn't working, I quickly kind of shifted to no, join me in making this thing. And that was a big lesson and was huge for Crowdfunding Summit a year later for $12,000. but I was just using Facebook, and it was largely people I knew. I mean, it was $1,000, which was really hard for me at the time because I had no audience. I was still in school. I have a single mom. I don't come from money. I don't really have like a rich family or anything. And so $1,000 was hard to get. And that was humbling and really a good eye-opener for how hard it is, how hard crowdfunding is. I mean, now that I'm a crowdfunding specialist, I know all these statistics, and so I know that the average raise on most platforms, particularly Kickstarter, is $10,000. So despite all these like $1 million campaigns for film, the average is only $10,000. So you have and like 60% of campaigns fail. So you've got, it's hard, you know.
Yeah.
But then with Summit, I was on Twitter, and I had a lot of success on Twitter with crowdfunding.
Nice. Tell me about, and I know because we've talked about this before, but tell me about when you joined Twitter in terms of the Summit campaign.
I joined a week into my campaign when I had kind of hit the cap because, like I said, I know now that on average, only 30% of your network will actually contribute to your campaign. So I kind of hit that number, like, all right, I've gotten the most out of the people I know. I need to reach other people. And I was reaching out to press, but I think that I personally wasn't impressive enough because I didn't have enough of a presence online. And so my fiance, he has a background in marketing, and I spoke to him and a few other people, and they kind of got me to understand what Twitter really was and what it could be. And so I got on and almost immediately found support for my campaign just by sharing it and looking for people who were looking for genre films, who were changing the kind of regurgitated formula that we see a lot coming out of Hollywood. And just by looking, people at that time, it's different now because there's so many campaigns and you can't really get away with just like doing hashtag crowdfunding and expecting to be discovered because there's just so many. But at the time, it was a little bit easier to do that and to be discovered by people who genuinely were looking for a campaign to support. And so I had some people that were like a few people who still follow me on Twitter who were early followers who gave like $100 to my campaign because they liked giving to crowdfunding campaigns before I think it was like an expectation where like, of course you're going to give to crowdfunding campaigns.
Yeah. It's certainly the ecosystem for crowdfunding has shifted. Mm-hmm. When you were doing that was my first one, and that's how we met. We can talk about that later. But right. But one of the things that I was kind of curious about, as far as I'm gonna Snapchat this part too. Okay. Is one of the things that I was curious about was what would you say was the most effective outreach you did? Not even necessarily social media, even just in general for crowdfunding. When you did Summit, like what was the most effective outreach you had?
I mean, the most effective outreach I had was directly reaching out to people individually. I think that people go into crowdfunding campaigns thinking that they're just going to kind of put it out on social media and people will jump, and that's not what happens. You need to reach out to each person as an individual and give them a reason to care. Mm-hmm. And that's really what was a shift for me was, okay, why should this friend who I haven't spoken to since high school care about this film that I'm making? What do I know about them that would intrigue them about this project? And that's how I started reaching out to people. Like, you care about the genre? Great. Like, here's a reason. You care about women in film? Here's a reason. Whatever it was, I tailored the message to the person and really gave them a why. You know, why should you contribute? Not just like, give me money or I need money, please help me. It was like, here's a reason why you want to be involved. And that was huge. That's everything in crowdfunding, really. It's like checking your ego and like getting a list of emails together and saying, okay, these are the people I'm emailing today, and here's how I'm approaching it for each person, and just doing that.
And the incentive thing that you just touched on, I think kind of applies to even with people you don't know personally on social media that you're reaching out to, is exactly what you said. You don't want to approach it as like, give me money because you shouldn't be spending money on buying a, Starbucks cappuccino. You should be giving a struggling filmmaker a leg up. Like, that's, that pushes people away. You want to draw people in, and, like, exactly as you put it, here's something you can be a part of. Here's something you want to be a part of. Like, that's, whether it's crowdfunding or other forms of social media promotion, like, that's kind of the magic bullet.
And then really just actually, giving them the experience of being part of it. So it's not just telling them that they're going to become part of an experience, but actually giving them that experience by updating and like sharing content with them, behind the scenes stuff, and telling them. I blogged like throughout the entire process of crowdfunding, and then through everything. I mean, I blogged about every step of the way with Summit, when we were, when we locked our location, and when we were on set. I did a year later, I did a kind of journal of each day on set, what it was like from my perspective as the director of a no-budget feature. And then I did like blog posts about when we locked picture and when we did color correction, and kind of did like befores and afters, and just tried to make it very much like, you're part of this thing, you helped make this happen, here's where we are with it. And that was, I've got a lot of people to contribute to my next campaign because they appreciated that they got to be part of this experience and wanted to go through that again with me. And so
cool. I guess, so how did I am curious about how how what you did during the Summit campaign like impacted your future campaigns. Like it sounds like already from what you said that you learned a lot from it, and you learned a lot even from the first one that you did for $1,000. But like, is there anything specific that you took from doing the Summit campaign that you took into your next projects?
Yeah, so for my next campaign, I was on Seed and Spark, which I moved to because I felt like Seed and Spark was more about gaining an audience for the film and for you as a filmmaker, and being able to carry that audience to the next project. I particularly liked the follow feature, where people could follow your campaign like years after. I think what was frustrating about being on Kickstarter, even though it was perfectly fine for raising funds and being able to send out updates to people, I could only send out updates to the people that had given money at that time, and then that was it. It was locked off. With Seed and Spark, knowing the differences, I was able to kind of tailor the way I approached the campaign to that, like to gaining followers, so that people would continue following a project even like years after I had made the money. And that has proven true, that people do follow the campaign occasionally. But things that I learned, so many things. I was more prepared, I think, by the third one. Just like, even though I had learned a lot from my first campaign on Kickstarter, by the second one, I think I still was like, oh, I don't need to. I did a lot more message testing before my last one, whereas with Summit, I felt I was kind of naive in thinking that the genre itself would get people motivated, and that I didn't fully understand that I could reach out to press with a different voice each time. Like, I reach out to press generally with like, here's a synopsis, here's the deal, as opposed to really doing my homework in terms of who's reading this material and how do they like to be spoken to, and then how can I change my pitch to this press based on that to like entice them more. And I also think that I didn't reach out always with like a clear objective of what the end result would be with the film. Like I didn't plan as much for like, what do I want from these people at the end of the day? Like, what am I trying to get from them? With the Kickstarter, it was like, I just need to make the money to make Summit. That was it. It was just like, make Summit. With the next campaign, it was like, okay, get them to follow me as a filmmaker, follow my brand, and pay attention to everything that I do beyond this point. Bring them in to my work in general. And so I was able to use things like getting to watch Summit for free and past work that I had done, like I had a web series between making Summit and then doing my last campaign a year and a half ago. I was able to kind of give away like exclusive materials that no one else had seen, right, to entice people into checking out the rest of my work, not just these particular projects. And so I think that was like a big shift, was I'm the brand. Me as a filmmaker, that's the brand, not this particular project necessarily. So like there are Summit fans, which is wonderful, but Summit, you know, is online to rent or buy if people want to, but it's done. You know, what I want is people to follow me to the next project and the next project and the next project.
Right. And
that was a big shift in how I approach crowdfunding.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. This is my last like written down thing. If you have any questions, that's fine. And then we have two things from the Facebook stream. The last thing I have is because now you are a member of the Seed and Spark team. What kind of advice do you have for people who are looking to do a crowdfunding project? I mean, I know you're working with a lot of people right now, but like what's like the first thing that they should know before, let's say they do Seed and Spark and they have to submit, and the thing that they should know before you're giving them feedback on their project?
I mean, they should know that it's a lot of work. They should be prepared to do a lot of preparation, really. It's like kind of preparing yourself for what it takes to crowdfund. So you're putting together email lists. That's the big thing, is that people come in saying, oh, I want to launch in, 3 days, and I have my pitch video and I have like my materials, but they have no email list. And so it's like, who are you sending this campaign to? And I think the biggest, not so much now, but even still a little, the biggest misconception is that people think like, oh, if you build it, they will come. And that's not at all the case. There is really no discoverability. Like, yeah, you can, being on our platform, being on Seed and Spark, we do a little bit more promotion of the projects than other platforms, and we do have a base of people that are regularly checking out our site looking for what's new, but that doesn't mean that they're going to choose your campaign or even see your campaign. And so it really is on you to be doing this direct outreach, and I think that's huge. So like, have a list of every person that you have direct access to, and be looking to build that list. And also have a team. I think that's another thing, is like, you really can't crowdfund alone unless if you're going for like $1,000 maybe, but it's really hard to crowdfund alone because it is a full-time job for the 30 days or however many days you run it. And if you have a life, if you have a job, if you have kids, if you have whatever, you can't be at it full-time.
You need support. Jeff Sarin had a question.
Oh yeah.
And Jeff is a good friend of ours. He friend of the show.
Friend of the show.
Jeff Sarin. Yeah, he's a wonderful young man, that Jeff Sarin. So here's what Jeff said from our Facebook stream. Newbie question here, but are there grants or similar funds available to independent filmmakers to make shorts or features, maybe by genre or topic or PSA? So the answer to that, the quick answer to that is yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are. There are all of those things. And I think they've traditionally been like a way where people have funded films. I mean, for a second I was going to say before crowdfunding, but generally speaking, their crowdfunding is not like necessarily this new magic thing that never existed before, so much as a new iteration of
like traditional fundraising and campaigning.
Yeah, and it's just the new thing about it is really the platforms. But yes, there's quite a lot of grants. It's probably, I don't know if it's just as much work or less work to do the grants than to do the crowdfunding.
It depends on the grant. I mean, It's a lot of like filling out of information, research. but maybe less of your time overall, like at the end of it. Yeah. But I mean, grants are great if you can get them. I mean, so many people are applying for the same grant, essentially. Right. And what I think crowdfunding does that nothing else does is help you build an audience for something that doesn't yet exist. And so with a grant, it's still kind of like you in this project as opposed to igniting this interest from a mass of people. But if you can find, like, you should definitely be researching grants and looking for opportunities to get funding. Just know that you probably have to start preparing months before the deadline. You want to be getting materials together and kind of writing.
Yeah, and there are a lot of grants, but there are more filmmakers than there are grants.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. And I also think it's easy if you're making, not easy, but easier if you're making something that's very mission focused or like works with a cause. But like grants are not very genre friendly, as I'm sure you've experienced. And so it's like I've looked into so many female oriented grants, like woman director, but it's like genre films not welcome, things like that.
Yeah, a lot of opportunities like that for women are not for women making the kind of films that you and I like to make. What was I gonna say? Shit. Oh yeah, it also depends where you are. Like that question was posed in a general way. We're all operating in the United States. And different countries have very different opportunities in terms of what grants there are. Canada is, to my knowledge, for instance, a lot better in terms of there is more money available for artists looking to make films than there is in this country, and etc. So like we're answering in a very US centric way, and
absolutely
results may vary.
Yeah, correct.
So I've looked into grants personally, but I've never actually like applied for any, just because I don't think I necessarily qualified for most of them. Just like you're talking about genres, I don't think what I was doing was. But there's definitely a lot of that, and I think that's a good point about the outside the U.S. It's a very different system for that, and there's a lot more government funding and stuff like that. And Roger just chimed in that there are grants in Canada. Yes. Thank you, Roger. Actually, to get to Roger's first question, he has two, and I think we can take both of them at the very least for the stream, if not for everything. His first question was how. Let me actually confirm this because I lost the old comments because of the thing. But where was it? Roger's first question was, okay, this is a good question, and you kind of touched on this a little bit. I think you're really probably the expert for this one, working with Seed and Spark, but how long should somebody prep before launching their campaign? Before launching their crowdfunding campaign, what kind of prep time should they be giving themselves? Like a week and a half?
3 days.
I would say 2 months.
2 months.
At the very least, 2 months.
2 months of prep time.
Yeah. Before, like, we recommend on Seed and Spark 2 months before you submit for feedback. That, like, the feedback process could be very long depending on where you start and whether or not you've done your homework about what crowdfunding is and what it takes and what you need. But I would say 2 months is, like, a solid enough time where you can kind of collect video materials and prepare updates and do some message testing and, anything less than that is really tight because you don't have time to make adjustments based on feedback then, you know.
Right.
You want to have the time to send out maybe different marketing materials to different people and getting feedback. Like, how does this look? Does this catch your eye? How do you think would this, like, make you want to contribute? Should I change the wording? You want to give people time to get back to you.
What kind of work do you think? I mean, I have some ideas, but what kind of work do you think that people should be doing during that period? Like, is it just like prepping their materials? Is it more about collecting those lists? Should they be telling people ahead of time?
I think that they should. I mean, I would definitely recommend building some sort of momentum up to the campaign, letting people know that it's coming, so that you can kind of get this excitement. If you sound excited, then other people might feel excited. You don't want to just like spring this thing on them and say like, oh, we need money to make it. You want to kind of ease them into that, especially the people you know. So if they know that you're going to be asking for contributions in advance, then you won't get so much like, oh, I don't have the money right now, or I'll do it at the end of the campaign. If people know it's coming, then they're more likely to contribute on day one or week one, which you really need to kind of get momentum behind a campaign. You need those like early supporters so that strangers coming to a project see that there is momentum and that there is success. This is going to be successful. So yeah, I would say like building some kind of hype and a schedule and letting people know this is the day, and doing outreach. If you can do outreach early and say, we're launching on this date, will you contribute whatever the amount is on that day? That's great if you can do that, if you can get those commitments from people. Because the worst thing is to launch and then just be dead, like stuck at 0%. Especially if you're like sharing it to people like, oh, I just launched this thing, and they had not heard of it previously, and they go to the page and they just see 0. That's not encouraging.
Right.
Yeah, because people want to back winners, which if that's not like intuitively obvious, like that's a really important thing, not only in crowdfunding, in any kind of fundraising. Right. People want to back a winner. They don't, even though on a lot of platforms, if a campaign is not successful, your credit card's not charged. So in a sense, like, well, that's a way that you can show support if it's just an interpersonal thing. But in general, there's this overwhelming mass psychology thing of people don't want to give to a crowdfunding campaign that looks like it's going to fail.
Right.
They just don't.
Right. Because part of it, what you're selling them on, is the experience of being part of it. And so they don't want to feel like a failure,
Exactly.
because they're kind of taking this sort of emotional ownership of the campaign by contributing and getting involved. And no one wants to be involved in something that feels like it's not going to succeed.
Yep. Yeah. So it's a fine balance, balancing that kind of urgency of we need to raise X amount or nothing's going to happen versus, because you also don't want people to think like, oh, we're doing fine, don't worry about it.
Right.
It's a nice trick, finding that balance.
Yeah, it is all about balance.
So
cool. We have one more question from Roger. I think we can do a second question. From what you have all seen, what is the average successful budget amount filmmakers should aim for? 5,000, 10,000, 25,000. I have my opinion on it, and my opinion is generally generally like you can raise about as much as you can raise about as much as you think people will give you, not strangers, but like you can raise marginally a small amount more than like if your friends and family are likely to contribute to your campaign. I don't know that. So if you have a lot of like rich friends, you can probably raise $100,000, and if you have a lot of people who are just other filmmakers, you can probably raise like 5,000 to 10,000 maybe. Right. And you have to have a lot of those friends. Yeah. That's my opinion. That's what I've my experience. I've never really raised lots and lots and lots of money. But I think that that's my experience with it. I don't know. What do you
want to
think?
say something?
Yeah, I mean, not to play devil's advocate, but by the same token, it depends on someone's circumstance. But there are a lot of people who will give you, who don't have a lot of disposable income, but can afford to give you a little bit of money. And if you're asking for $5,000, they're going to give you $5. And if you're asking for $20,000, they're going to give you $20. There are a lot of people who, like if you set the goalpost further, people are going to just go a little bit further to whatever they can within their comfort level. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're trying to raise more money and you don't have a lot of rich friends or family, it is going to be harder. You are going to have to be putting in more time going through those email lists and contacting people individually, one-on-one, asking people to re-up and give you more. And like, if they've given you $5, be like, can you do 10? Can you do 7? Can you do 6? Whatever, like that kind of very time-consuming and not particularly fun one-on-one fundraising. But the other important thing is in terms of how much money you want to try to raise through crowdfunding and what makes sense, it just completely has to do with how much money you need for your project. And that's like the main thing for me is if you can't do your film without $20,000, you should try to raise $20,000. You should really try to raise $25,000 because whatever platform you use is probably going to take a percentage of your fee. And you're also going to have to put money towards getting everybody their backer rewards and all of that. And there's probably going to be additional expenses, whatever. So like the question is, yes, I think it's very true that it's harder than it's ever been to raise money on crowdfunding. So you don't want to aim higher just for the hell of it. But you do have to be very realistic of like, how much money do I need to make my vision happen? And you have to aim for whatever that amount is, unless you have other contingency plans and maybe you'll fail and you don't get to make your movie. But if you can't make your movie for $5,000, having $5,000 instead of 20 isn't going to do you any good. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I have a few things. I agree with that, absolutely, that you need to be able to deliver on what you're promising people. So you shouldn't, go for 5,000 when you really need 20 and kind of lead people to believe that you're making this film that really costs 20,000 and then you try to make it for 5 or you just like pocket that money or whatever it may be. But yeah, it doesn't do anybody any good. I do think that there is no magic number. It really is about who can you reach and what do you need. How much money do you need? Not how much do you want? What is your budget? What do you need? And can you get that with your current network? And if not, then you should be exploring options. On Seed and Spark, for instance, we offer staged funding where you can do it in stages, where like you can raise for pre-production and then post-production, kind of building your audience between each campaign, but coming back to the same campaign page with each stage, so you're keeping your followers and building on your followers. That's pretty cool for people that are just starting out and maybe don't have that reach. I will say, to your point, that when I went for 20,000 in my last campaign compared to 12, I did get higher contributions from the same people. But that's also, I do think that yes, when people feel like the stakes are higher, they give bigger, but I also kind of earned that in a way because I delivered on what I promised the first time around, and people maybe, I hope, did want more, so they gave more. But like I said before, the average raise, is 10,000 on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. I don't know about Indiegogo because most of their campaigns fail. They're flexible funding, it's whatever. But on Kickstarter, for instance, it's 10,000. On Seed and Spark, it's 17,000. That's the average. But you have to have a pretty big social media following even just to get those average numbers. Just to break it down in terms of math and numbers, so only 30% of your following statistically will contribute. So if you put together an email list of everyone you have direct access to, 30% of that number, they will make a contribution. The average contribution is $25. And statistically, strangers don't get involved until a campaign hits 30%. So if 30% of your network giving $25 each gets you to 30% of your goal, then okay. If not, maybe it's too high for your reach and you need to go a little bit smaller. So kind of keep that in mind. Yes, there are people that will give more than 25, but just kind of staying in that range of averages, you should be safe.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's probably, I would say that's all the time that we have for this particular episode. But unless you have anything you'd like to chime in with, okay. So let's, this is a slightly less well constructed, fun thing to end the episode with. It's kind of a game.
Okay.
And Facebook people, if you're watching right now and you want to pipe in with your attempt to answer this game is basically guess the song based on the lyrics that I genuinely thought, the misheard lyrics that I genuinely thought were the lyrics to the song for years, but I was so wrong. I was so incredibly wrong.
Sean is wrong. That's a fun segment.
That would actually be a fun segment. Sean is wrong. There would be a lot. So the fun thing. So the lyric is, "She's a slut. You mourn and you will know."
What the fuck is that?
Exactly. What the fuck is that?
So you misheard it.
I misheard the lyrics to a song as "She's a slut, you mourn, and you will know," and I assumed that these were the lyrics to the song for years, and I thought it's kind of appropriate, but it's also kind of a fucked up lyric.
Anyone at home know what the hell he's talking about? I have a guess of the genre.
Would it give it away if you did it like in?
Oh, no, I can't sing for shit, so it wouldn't help you at all. I can't sing, so it wouldn't help you. But I will tell you, it is a classic. It's not even classic rock. It's an oldies song. It's like it would be on an oldies radio station.
It's not AC/DC?
It's not AC/DC. Well, I guess those would be on oldies now, but it's also related to a film. It's the theme song for a film.
Okay.
That's an oldie.
It's not like Moon River?
No, it's not Moon River.
What kind of film?
Oh, I got it on Facebook, but I'm not gonna let you guys.
Oh,
say.
someone.
Brad Jackson just guessed. You guessed right, Brad.
Shout out Brad Jackson.
I mean, I don't think we're gonna get it.
We're lost. We don't know about the slut you mourn.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
You mourn and now you know.
That sounds.
Oh, and Chelsea Rogers makes a good point. Does anyone ever know what Sean is talking about? Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you, Chelsea.
So Brad got it, but do you guys want me to just tell you now? It's Mrs. Robinson from Simon and Garfunkel. The actual lyric is "Jesus loves you more than you will know."
Wow.
And since I was like a kid, I was like, "That's a fucked up lyric," and that is not an appropriate lyric. So that was our fun thing, and that's the song that for probably half a decade I misheard that lyric, and.
That's an appropriate lyric, though, for, like, the movie.
Oh, it's totally appropriate for the movie. And I hadn't even seen the movie. So I didn't see the movie until years after, even after I'd, like, learned that the lyric was different. And, because I think some friends heard, like, I said it in front of some friends, like, yeah, it's a weird lyric. Like, why would he say that? And they were like, that's not the lyric. And then we had to have a conversation about it. So anyway, so that's the show this time. We should probably tell people where they can find, all of us on the internet.
Us here?
Us here.
Okay.
Not them there. They already know where they are.
Wow. So, hey, Christina, where can we find you? Where can these wonderful people listening find you online?
They can find my website is ChristinaRaia.com or my company site CongeskedCat.com or at CRaia9 on Twitter and Instagram. Or Google me, I think, like, I'm the first person that comes up. But, yeah, Summit is available on Vimeo on demand and VHX, and maybe I just signed a small distribution deal, so it may be elsewhere in the near future, probably like a year. It takes forever, but maybe somewhere else soon. But for now, you can watch a lot of my short content for free, like my web series and shorts. And Summit's only $2.99 to rent. So why not rent it?
Yeah, why not?
That's hardly anything at all. I bought it.
I rented it, but I may buy it because I want to see it again.
There are bonus features, like I did director's commentary where I just, was talking for 2 hours, and cast commentary and like behind the scenes stuff and some cool content that. If you're into filmmaking, for me, it was a big learning experience. I have a real love-hate relationship with the film, but I think in particular, one, if you want something different from the genre, and maybe if you want to see how I kind of tried to comment on, like, race and gender in the genre, then you should check it out. But also, if you're interested in filmmaking and want to see how my work has progressed and maybe what I learned from making that film, then you should definitely check it out.
Awesome. And we're on the internet too, aren't we, Sean?
We are. As a team, we're 4MileCircus, which is Twitter at 4MileCircus. It's the number 4, the word mile with an I, and circus also with an I. All one word, no hashes, no underscores, no dashes, nothing. It's the same on Instagram, and it's the same on Facebook. Yeah.
And on Facebook, they can actually interact with us when we do podcasts like this. Isn't that right, Sean?
That's what's been working out so far. So we've got so if you go to we'll announce probably a little bit better than these first episodes, but we'll announce that we're doing a recording, and you can follow along and make comments and do all that good stuff, and let us know what you think, and ask questions of our guests like Christina Raia.
And we're also at 4MileCircus.com if people want to check out our video production as well as social media services. We're here to help.
We are here to help.
Ourselves.
Mostly ourselves. So join us on the next episode, where we will be talking to Christina a little bit more about production of Summit and how she used social media for that.
So any independent filmmakers out there who are going to be going into production ever and are curious about how social media can and should play a role in helping to build the audience for your film once it's completed during that period of time, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about to somebody who really knows her stuff. So please join us for that.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice, and check out other 4 Mile Circus services and projects at 4milecircus.com, as well as 4 Mile Circus on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Watch our first VOD release, Nicole's award-winning feminist phone sex horror comedy Small Talk, at 4milecircus.com/store, and be sure to check out Christina Raia's work at congestedcat.com and chat with her on most social media platforms, on which she is CRaia9. Catch you next time.